why we are giving the same feed to all these animals? Those that are slow growing, they don't need the same thing that those that are fast growing animals. So we have, I think it's very important. We have to change the way we are feeding the pigs. We have to personalize the feeding, but also we have to change the sources of nutrients we are using to feed the pig.
Welcome to Swine at Canada. My name is John Patience, and I'll be your host for today's podcast. With us today, we have Dr. Candido Pomar, who is a research scientist with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada in Sherbrooke, Quebec. So welcome, Candido, and how are you today?
Thank you. Very well. Thank you.
And before we get further into the podcast, Candido, can you give us a bit of your background? You have a very interesting background, very diverse background, and perhaps you could share that with our listeners today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation and give me the opportunity to talk about my career and my thoughts about swine, particular nutrition. But just to start, you realize that they have an accent. In fact, I was born in Spain, so I was born in near Barcelona. So I have a mother tongue and a father tongue. My mother tongue was Catalan and my father tongue was Spanish. So we are still using both languages when we get the family together. So I don't know why. With some of my brothers, I still speak in Catalan, and with others, I still speak in Spanish. So I was raised. My father he had a farm. He was a farmer. So he has two different areas of farming. One is there was a long period where my father used to produce a lot of fruits. So apple, peaches, I think the best that I remember, and I still dreaming sometimes to eat these peaches that I used to eat when I was young, and all kind of fruits. That was very good. But there was another area that it was in a very dry area where she used to produce cereals. Barley was the most important cereal we used to produce wheat, and also meat sheep. So that was I was there. So I started, normally we were living in a city, and during the vacation time, we used to go to work in the farm. So I work all the summers in the farm for my father, in both areas, the fruits at the beginning, and then I finished with the cereal production. And there I developed an interest in working with sheep. But I should tell you that when I was finishing, I was being ready to go to the university, my interest was mathematics. I want to study in mathematics and not animal production or whatsoever, not in agriculture. So my father was not very happy with me going to the mathematics, because at that time, particularly in Spain, they was going to study mathematics. That was difficult to get a future with that, because there was not too much possibilities for employment. Other than the university, that was not very high. There was not possibilities to get a job. So they just talked with me one day. I remember I was finishing my studies before the university. It was an uncle, my father, my brother. Candido, you should not go to the mathematics, to the university. You have to do other things. So I decided to go to an engineering career. So in Spain, when you want to be agronomist, you go to the Polytechnic University. So I went to Madrid, but I did my studies in agriculture, and I specialized in animal science, and with the idea of working in nutrition. But then there was something very particular in my life. I fell in love with a Canadian woman. So, and I decided to follow her, and I came here to Canada not with the idea of studying or doing anything, other than just following this girl. And then I applied for a master at the University of Laval, and they accepted me. And I started working there. I was very happy doing my master. But there was a professor that after he became my PhD director, he was feeding me with papers about mathematical modeling. I didn't know anything about mathematical modeling. Why he is giving me these papers? I don't understand anything about that. Yeah, I was interested in quantitative genetics, maybe, or something like that. That I was having very nice results, and the professor were happy with me. That he was always feeding me with papers about the modeling, mathematical modeling, in particular those that was coming from Lee Baldwin from California. All the paper from him. So slowly he was talking to me, and he invited me. He gave me a nice grant to do my PhD in a mathematical modeling in Swine. And that's how I started doing modeling. Is just because I have a professor that maybe he was showing me the possibilities of doing these kind of things. And I said, only one condition for my PhD. I said, it is I don't want to study at Laval University because I did my master. I would like to go to the US and have a good education on mathematical modeling. So we tried different places. So I went to Michigan State University to follow some courses on mathematical modeling. And then I finished doing my research in Nebraska, in Clay Center, the Meat Animal Research Center in Nebraska, a very little town just in the middle of the countryside, a very nice place to study, to work. That's so interesting for a young man like I was. So that's how I started doing my PhD. And then back to Quebec, to Canada. Then the university hired me for a while, and then it was Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada that was interested in developing this mathematical modeling approach. They call my position system analyst. The idea at this time is just to try to take a lot of data and put this data in the models. And we thought that we will avoid a lot of research just because we had all this data. That was a dream because, yes, you can use the data, but our knowledge was very simple. And soon I realized that I had to combine experimental trials with mathematical modeling because the data we had is poor and it's not enough. We had to understand what's happening in the animal, what's happening in the system to model it. It's not just a question of getting data. We have to get understanding and go from understanding to modeling. Is that what I did? So I started doing that. And nutrition was my favorite area. So I did most of my work in nutrition, and working on that, we developed the first model that we put in a software that was called Pork Expert, but it was very little diffusion of that. But the big problem that they had at that time, John, and probably you realize that, is that we are working with average values all the time, but we are modeling. We want to feed populations, large groups of animals, but we are always working with average value. So we were modeling one animal, and from one animal, we tried to extrapolate these values to populations. So I was struggling with that, and I said, we cannot use these kind of models to estimate the requirements of a populations or just simulating what are the resources populations. So I went to Scotland in a sabbatical for a year. I say, I had to dig about that. What is the difference between one animal and the populations in terms of response? And I was working with Gary Evans, and particularly with him, and then Elias Kyriasakis, and a lot of work, a lot of simulations. And then is when I realized that we were not right just using one animal model to represent populations. And I wrote a paper and I say, no, we have to develop population models. And I started working with population models. And then I realized after a few years that was not possible. We did not have information enough to represent the variation between the animals.
Excuse me, Candido. So before we get into that, because I think that's going to be the meat of our podcast here, just to summarize, really your research, your training was really kind of serendipitous. When you were growing up near Barcelona, you never dreamed that you would end up in Canada and become one of the foremost modelers in the world. And how often that happens in the research world. And some of the names that you were associated with were real pioneers in the field. You mentioned Jerry Emmons. He's obviously influenced a lot of modelers over the years. So credit to you, credit to Agriculture Canada for supporting you. And but let's turn our attention then to the subject at hand, which you have suggested for the podcast, which I think is very appropriate and very interesting. And that is the whole question of how we should be feeding our pigs and how we need to do it differently than in the future than we have been doing it in the past. And I'm really interested in what your thoughts are on that, because I think one of the things we like to do in the podcast is help our audience to be aware of where the trends are and where they're going in the future so they can be prepared. So how do you think we should be feeding our pigs in the future, Candido?
Not just feeding, how we should raise the pigs, because I think that we develop the way today we are producing all the livestock, that we will take the pigs in particular, and we say this wave of feeding and raise the animals was developed 70, 100 years ago and has developed in more recent years, but just based in the knowledge that we had at the time and the technology that we had at the time. So at that time, the consideration of animal well-being was limited, but the relationship between how we are producing and the environment was in existence. I do remember when I started doing my research that we were adding phosphorus without caring too much about the level of phosphorus. And also, I remember giving some talks and asking to the producers, if I give you a diet that has 20% protein and another that has 16, which one you are going to choose? Oh, the 21 is better. More protein the feeds they had, better we thought they were. And that's not true. So today we are really, the farms grow a lot. And now the relationship between the animals or the farms and the environment is very high. And we have now to integrate this interaction within the way we are raising and feeding the pigs. So the question we have to raise is, can we continue to producing pigs or poultry or whatever in the same manner? The question is no. I think the status quo is not going to be acceptable because we are polluting in some way, or it's very heavy for the environment to support the way we are feeding and raising the animals. So we have to change. The question is how we are going to change, which is the direction we have to take to produce animals in a way that is more friendly for the environment. So the question is, should we maintain using corn, soybean feeds to raise our pigs? Take a gestating sow. Make it sense to use corn and soybean meal for a gestating sow when this sow can eat 6 times more dry matter than we are giving to her, or even more. She can use other sources of energy, other sources of protein that are less problematic for the environment, and also there is no competition with humans' needs. So we have to change the way we are producing. So we have to use other sources of feed ingredients that are more in agreement with the soil that is behind the farm. The question is, why we don't use high quality forages to feed the sow? Why we don't use high quality forages maybe to feed a finishing pig, which he can eat. He can use all these sources of nutrients without too much problem. He cannot take bad forages, but high quality forages, why not? So that's one point, which ingredients we are going to use to feed the animals. Another aspect is, should we feeding the animals as we are feeding today with a unique feed for all the animals. When you have animals that are high, they are growing at a very fast speed, and others that are growing slowly, we are feeding all the same way. The requirements of the animals in a given farm is very different. I remember one paper that very often I'm talking about, one of your papers, John, that you presented. You went to a farm in Saskatchewan and say you took a farm where the average body weight of the pigs were 104 kilos, I think, something like that. And then you show there is pigs that they are still having 74 kilos body weight, but others they're at 130. Why we are giving the same feed to all these animals? Those that are slow growing, they don't need the same thing that those that are fast growing animals. So we have, I think it's very important, we have to change the way we are feeding the pigs. We have to personalize the feeding, but also we have to change the sources of nutrients we are using to feed the pig.
So, I understand your point, and this is a great forum to have this kind of conversation, Candido, and I appreciate this. And you've done so much work over the years asking these questions and looking for answers. And as you were going back to your first point about the ingredients, and you're right, we don't have to feed corn and soybean meal. In Western Canada, lots of pigs go to market and don't see, maybe after 25 kilos, they don't see soybean anymore, and they probably never see any corn. It's wheat and barley. But I think that the answer, so do we have to feed corn and soy? The answer would be no, but the answer would be we do it. The explanation would be we do it because it's the way we can keep our costs as low as possible so we can survive as farmers.
But that's true, but may not be true for a long time, because that's another way. I think we have to look, and I don't have clear numbers. We have a student now working on that. Is if you look from an acre, an hectare, how many energies you can obtain if you produce corn, or how many energies you can obtain if you produce high quality forages. So maybe the answer is a little bit there, because if you produce corn, probably you are going to obtain less finally available energy for this animal. And to obtain this energy, in the production of corn in relation of the production of forages. But in the same forages, maybe we can look to other products, other feed ingredients. Corn is very expensive in terms of the impact that has to the environment. Another plant production may not be like forages. So we have to look not just the cost today, but at the large term, when we are going to be so many people in the world, how we are going to get the most available energy and in compliance with the environment from the surface that is available. And probably another question is going to come, John, is how much water we are going to need to produce that. Because water is going to be also an important issue in the coming years. So we have to foresee all these things. And our research, I think it's very important. What research has to bring is this knowledge, which is the best way, the most environmentally friendly way to produce energy and protein to raise our animals, avoiding the competition with what we need for human consumption.
Yeah, you've raised very, very good points, that there's more than one way to look at how we evaluate ingredients. I'm glad you raised water, of course, a favorite topic of mine. And the fact that our use of fresh water globally exceeds the supply of fresh water globally. And so we are definitely going to have to make some adjustments to use water more efficiently. And that one still, there's a lot of work needs to be done in that area to allow us to do that. But we know that's going to become a touching point, because if there's three major users of water: industry, people, and agriculture. And we know who would be number 3 on the priority list if there's a shortage of water. So we have to, but I'd like to take you down a slightly different path. And I find your comments fascinating, Candido. What about co-products and byproducts? Because when we look at sustainability, and for example, I was at a conference a couple of years ago where they were talking about the co-products and byproducts of various industries that utilize corn, for example, or other ingredients. And if we don't have enough pigs or poultry to utilize those co-products, what are we going to do with them? Because we can't take them to landfills. We can't dump them on the land. They have to be utilized for productive purpose. And the point was made at that conference. And of course, we didn't have time to get into the dollars and cents and the quantity. But for example, there's an awful lot of distillers grains being used by the pig and poultry industry that if they didn't exist, not sure where those industries that create those co-products would be less efficient themselves.
No, you are right. And I was talking about forages, but co-products and byproducts are as important as our forages. So we have to avoid the competition with humans in some way. And no, in some way, we have to avoid, because we are going to be soon in a problem with the availability of protein between animals and humans. But there is, I think, the use of byproducts and co-products is very important. We have to use. And in particular, if you look in the past, poultry and mainly pigs have been using that in the farm yard. So that is not a new thing. They in the past, normally they raise pigs using the products, though the things that we couldn't use for human consumption. So no, we have to use that, and that's the way to go. We have to avoid. We have to look at the best way to raise these animals, but we have to bring swine production in link with the soil that is around. We have to, because now you can produce pork without having any land. So we have to stop that and linking swine production with the land that is around, and make to try to get this circular economy in some way. So what the waste from the animals goes back to the land, and then you produce and you recover as much as you can of all these nutrients. I think we have to do that, and of course, the co-products and byproducts are as an important point. That's in terms of ingredients. I think the other point that is very important is we have to personalize the feeding. That's the other point, because what we obtain here is we are wasting a lot of nutrients feeding all the animals together. So personalized feeding is going to be the future, because each animal is different from each other. And I think it's an area where research has to develop a lot, because we have been developing our knowledge in terms of average responses of a group. We always forgetting that there is animals with very different metabolism of the other ones. So we are seeing, in particular, when we restrict a group of animals, you will see that there is some animals that even if you are restricted in terms of protein intake, for instance, you are going to see some animals that are still performing very highly. Like you were feeding them as we think were to requirements, while there is another pigs that they cannot respond to that, and they are losing. So when you restrict a group, the average group response goes down, but there is pigs that maintain growth while others loses. And another point is diseases. We have to be very careful. I think in the future we are going to be very careful, because when we are personalizing the feed intake, the feed supply, and we are reducing protein provision, we have to be very careful, because an animal that is sick or it has the immune system activated, the requirements goes very high, and you have to be careful, because if you are using low protein diets or you are personalized, you are using precision feeding. So you reduce the amount of protein you're providing to all the animals, you can collapse, because when the animals are sick, these low protein diets may not be the most appropriate ones to feed these animals. And precision feeding we are going to need to recalibrate these models to provide higher levels of protein, because the protein needs are much higher. And maybe energy also, but energy intake normally goes down for most of the diseases. So we have to learn. Science will have, I think, in the future a big role. We have to understand much better the difference between the animals, what makes an animal different from each other, to be able to feed each one according to what they need. And also to identify in some situations, heat stress, diseases, how we have to feed these pigs, because we cannot feed them as they were normal, or you cannot feed in the same way. So when we were feeding animals in groups with a large amounts of nutrients, sometimes we didn't see this big decrease. But if we use low protein diets, or if we are using precision feeding, then we can have some problems with this situation. So that's we are going to be able to identify much better how much nutrients to provide, but we have to be careful, because in some situations needs changes.
Yes, and you have done a huge amount of work in that area over your career, Candido, trying to identify how those nutrient requirements vary within a population of pigs and how they might be fed differently. And so far you've raised two issues with respect to nutrition of pigs in the future. The first is the ingredients that we utilize. And then the second is the manner in which we provide nutrients to the pigs in the most efficient manner. And because our time is moving on, unfortunately, were those the 2 points you wanted to talk about, or were there other points that you wanted to raise? And if so, please raise them now briefly, because we'd like to hear if you have other ideas as well.
Well, there is another point, but I will not go too far from that. I think in the future we have to develop this. We are going to say precise production system, not just feeding only, but we are going to have to develop the technology. So technology is going to be an important issue in the future, because to develop this modern swine production system, and this for all the livestock, and this also for any kind of thing. So we are going to need the technology, and technology has to be developed for that, for precision feeding, for weighing the animals, identifying the animals, because imagine that we are able to identify the animals and follow how each animal is growing and eating. So you are at the door to see if there's any problem in terms of disease or environmental problem. You are going to be able to identify very quickly an animal that is coming to be sick. And so your intervention is going to be very early in the development of the disease. So the need of any treatment, antibiotics or other, is going to dramatically decrease, because you are able to. So technology is going to be a big issue. I'm not going too far, but the future, I think, of this production of livestock is different for building cars. So you have robots for everywhere. So I think we are going to use the technology also to produce the animals and take advantage of this technology to help us to take the better decision.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point, Candido, because really, as I listened to your comments with respect to the formulation of the diets and then the delivery of the diets, the application of all that in the barn is really dependent on technology, right? That we have to be able to have systems that work in a commercial barn and identify the thing in real time, the variables that you're talking about. So it's a fascinating look at the future, Candido. It's really too bad that you're approaching retirement. That's you should give us at least another 10 years, if not 15 years of your time.
John, I'm saying sometimes to the student, I'm sad, because I would like now to be starting my research career.
Yes.
There is so nice, interesting things to do is so exciting, John. I would like to be young and to be at the starting point of my career. But anyway, that's a turn
Absolutely.
of young people to do it. That is
That's right. It's the turn for the next generations.
It's time for our famous three. The Nutrition Athena, Shakespeare Mill, Farmhouse, and Nutrition Partners Nutrition Group offer the full range of nutritional product based on extensive research and developments, and a solid team of experts all across Canada. Our objective is to provide cost-effective solutions, innovation, and support to producer from the entire Canadian swine industry.
Thanks very much. I'd like to finish now. Really good points in your presentation there, but I would like to finish with 3 questions. And the first question that I have for you is, do you have a favorite swine-related book that you use or have used in the past that you would recommend to our listeners?
Well, there is many books. Today, I will say that most interesting information is coming from journal articles where it is updated. But I will say that the book that I open more often is the NRC. It's not because I love it. It's because it has a lot of information that very often we use it as reference. So this is one. But I have a very nice books that I read time to time about big production. So which one? Well, every year, several books in a year are appearing and very, very interesting information. So no, I think I don't have one specific to recommend, but you can. There is many books. But in terms of information, I think where I'm getting more information is from journal articles where I like.
Right. Yeah. Yep. You bet. So now then, my second question is somewhat related to the first question, and that is your favorite book that's not related to pigs.
Yeah. I'm sorry, John. I'm not a big book reader. In fact, I'm always reading all the time. I spend my day reading. I enjoy reading scientific journals, but not related to agriculture. So I enjoy a little bit of astronomy. I like to read journals about astronomy, but always short articles because I don't have time. My day is full and I don't have time. I should say that the only time where I spend reading is when I am on vacation. So my wife is not always very happy because then I take too much time for reading, but I enjoy reading books at that time. The books that I enjoy not related to science or to big production are those that are related to the history. Sometimes the history of Canada. I enjoy reading these kind of books, and that changes over time. At least I don't have any specific book to.
Okay, no, that's fine. And the last question, which is my favorite question to ask of people like yourself, because of your background and experience, that in your opinion, what sets successful people in the pig industry apart from others? What is it about them that makes them successful?
Very often what I say to the young people that are around me, as I said, believe in your dreams and go ahead. Don't be afraid, because sometimes young people are shy and think that their ideas are maybe not good. And they look at you and say, oh, you have a lot of experience, you have published a lot of things. You say, excuse me, believe in your dreams and go forward your dreams, and don't be passionate and go ahead, because your dreams are if you follow your dreams, you are going to be far, you are going to go far. If you are following my dreams, you are going to collapse. My dreams are not your dreams. You have to follow your dreams. Go ahead. And even if you think that your idea is maybe not good or whatsoever, go ahead if you believe. And listen to the others if you can modulate a little bit to give form of your ideas and your dreams, but follow your dreams. I will just tell you one thing. When I started my work in precision feeding, the other was one scientist that probably you know is Jaap van Miglen. Jaap van Miglen, he said, well, Candido, when you start talking about precision feeding, I said, this guy is foolish. This idea that doesn't make sense. That's the idea. I think we have to follow. I believe on that because I didn't see that was any future in feeding large groups of animals with only one feed. And I saw the impact of feeding personalized feeding. And I think that's what the important thing. Believe in your dreams and go ahead.
Right. Great. Well, great thoughts, Candido. And I really, really appreciate your taking time to share those, your thoughts with us, your vision for the future, your suggestions for young people as they look to develop their careers in the same way that you and others in your peer group have developed your career. So with that, I want to say thank you very much, Candido. I want to say goodbye to our listeners and look forward to sharing information with you in future podcasts of Swine It Canada. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your invitation.